March 5th, 2022. I've heard the term nuclear family. I'm not quite sure what that means. If they're speaking of like a nucleus with like all the like Golgi apparatus, the ribosomes, the mitochondria, the other things inside a cellular envelope, or if they're talking about something on a grander scale. I get lost in their words sometimes, unless it's real specific. But again, when it comes through on television, there's one-way communication, and then you're left to interpret it yourself, which is difficult. There's not an interaction where you really can get to the root and the heart of what your concerns are. So this morning they show, now I've been referred to as the girl with the pearl earring. I've been identified as so. Yesterday I found out that there's something, they mentioned something about Leonardo da Vinci's private collection papers and some art about the Virgin on the rock. Again, first time I noticed. Then there's the Pheno 9 Phoenix. I noticed that yesterday. Today, they're speaking of, they have this small, very small clip from some man by the name of Leon Panetta. And he mentions cyber attack, but Pearl Harbor scale. And that's what, I don't know if you say the warning of, or the imminent danger I was forced through after the Obama administration going into the election of Trump. And steadily just disintegrating. Thereafter, it's like this slide of answers.
And communication.
10 years ago, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta warned that the time would come when an enemy of the United States could hit this country with
CyberPearl Harbor. Any nuclear missile?
60 years ago, the world came to the brink of nuclear.
See, this is what nuclear war, this is where they push with it, because it's of this seriousness. But there's also a lesser spoken of, can't be spoken of, that's happening at this stage of humanity, which is even more frightening, because I wouldn't even know where to find someone to protect me from that level of nuclear attack. But yet, I'm stuck within some cyborg nucleus, we'll call it, under all sorts of threats and attacks, which I can pinpoint and decipher, but there's nobody to report them to. So that's even more frightening. Where do you go? Who do you speak to? When they just leave you in the field and pretend you don't exist. And what's worse is that there are other levels of management, because there's all different types of managers. It's just kind of one of these umbrella words that keep pushing for the wrong agendas and the wrong, like, things. I mean, it's so evident when you turn on the TV that they just keep ADDing. They keep adding more garbage into the system, making it swell and making it so difficult to itemize or finalize or fix specific issues for the betterment. It just keeps getting worse till something erupts, and then, you have a war, or it's not even a war, is what they're saying now. It's a peacekeeping mission. So, again, I don't know how to interpret it or how to read it, but the girl with the pearl earring did go through the next level attack. I'm traumatized by it. I'm still suffering underneath it, but it's not today, as it's like having a spinal tap through computerized service. It is horrific. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, it's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. What's even worse is they had a commercial one just before this called AmericanEagle.com. I think that's what it's called. I'll have to double check. Because that's a clothing line my son's like. But they had this guy with this tag from emerging technologies. It's like, now, I've heard of them in the IPO market, but on this particular, he's speaking of emerging technologies to like this board, like sales office boardroom, as if it's something to strive for and to push out in the market as a money-making schematic. That's frightening. Especially when, is it a spinal tap through your emerging technology? Is that what you're selling to the public with this IPO to raise capitals and funds for all sorts of unregulated facilities for biotechnologies? I'm just curious to all the people in like early 2000s who thought this was the next wave and the best way to go. I think they are the dumbest species on the planet. They purposely do things to hurt themselves, and they hurt others in horrific ways. So here it is. So it talks about Madonna. No, en français, Madonna is like the woman. Madame Madonna. But here's a commercial on it.
Joy. Madonna at AmericanEagle.com is monitoring a website with dozens of integrated systems, so if anything goes wrong, she'll spring into action before you even notice. Nothing gets by Madonna.
Do you see on her mug? It says, "Not on my watch." Now, this is AmericanEagle.com. Don't just grow sore. This is one commercial. Now it goes into the second commercial, which is the problem.
At AmericanEagle.com, we got a guy, Tim, who's so good.
Yeah, there was some place I got really upset with the "I got a guy." Now, here's the thing. He is not what I am upset with necessarily, because he comes in several different variety, which is the problem. There's too much variety in this IPO business, which is independently portfolio of something. It's an individualized portfolio of something that they give capital and give money for, and then they educate and they send out a sales force, which is what has grown new markets and new education systems, which has thrown off the wealth, redistributed, and then grown new dangers and new targets based on old predicated and verbalized hatred at certain levels. Certain people target and seek these things out once they hit, which is a really big problem, which I don't understand why that's not becoming a focus to shut it down.
So good with emerging technologies that help.
But this is my example.
I think he was from the future. Are you a hologram from the future, Tim? Very realistic.
So sitting there, if the IPO manager who's giving the money wants a mixed variety of recipients of the information, that puts everyone else in this gigantic calibration into harm's way. But nobody really knows about it because those are private meetings. It's privately funded, it's private meetings. But it is this emerging technology which has now hit the local consumer markets, which is now a biopharmaceutical concern on large scale. And I don't really hear or see anyone actively working to fix it. I certainly am stuck here in this forgotten about Fish Island as Virgin of the Rock with rock, paper, and scissors. And I don't know how to get where I need to be. There's one other piece that they showed last night about weather. They put on an hour special for the first alert weather, which I greatly appreciated, whoever put that compilation together. It was like a learning tool, which I appreciated because it was showing about the clouds and local vernacular and vocabulary to see how it interacts, because I have a very primitive, just whatever I can visually see, since none of the human construct has been passed along while they've had us here. Now, interestingly enough, on this compilation that they put together last night, right here, this woman knows where Upton is in New York. I had no idea. Apparently, the National Weather Service has a station on Long Island. I had no idea. I've lived here my entire life. No idea what that is, I still don't know what it is and does. There's been no introduction to it. There was no field trip as a child. My kids never went as a field trip there. But she's able to get there and she knows where it is. Now here's another piece that it alerts me last night.
March of 1888, we had over 200 fatalities in New York City alone, paralyzed the East Coast, and one of the most severe winter storms to ever affect the tri-state area.
Nelson Vaz is the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service in Upton. He said,
which nation does he work for? Just curious. Because there's a U.S. and there's an us where I'm supposed to be part of them and alerting them to potential threats that I see for national security at rock, paper, scissors, and I see them all the time. I've been documenting them. I'm just not quite sure how to tap Big Brother on the shoulder and go, I know you're busy, but I saw something. Doesn't look right. This part I really want to appreciate. This gentleman goes by the name Lonnie Quinn. Topography, I didn't even realize what the local vocabulary is. That's how poor the education system in the building they held us captive in for years, saying it was an education, but it really wasn't. We didn't even learn local vocabulary to discern the difference between higher elevation and sea level. But I guess you say Mr. Quinn, but Lonnie Quinn, that's the name he goes by. That's his television station name. He put weather to explain the difference.
That moisture out, you get your biggest snowfall totals in the mountain areas. Then as it's coming through the foothills, well, you're still picking up snow, not quite as much. It gets to those inland areas we talked about, and now you're...
Yeah, foothills and inland. Those are the ones I was missing for vocabulary. That's going to take some work because it's not ingrained in, I don't really hear anyone speaking of it. And I did not have a visual depiction when they do mention it so quickly and so briefly. It's a little hard to follow the conversation and actually connect with what it is that they're speaking of.
Now you're looking at a wintry mix, rain, sleet, snow combined. By the time it gets to the shoreline communities, the ocean air has influenced it just too much. It's too...
Now, I hear that we have this big climate change. There's lava flows, there's melting ice caps. There's like some real concerns. And yet, the simplest education being a couple of weather vocabulary words, how to participate, how precipitation works, even that, the local New York City area has not bestowed upon the children that enter those buildings. Now, this is interesting because apparently there's different models, which I didn't know about. There's this gentleman, he knows about them, and he's speaking. Apparently there's a scientist that owns the weather formula. He goes, I think they said Vilhelm, and it's Bjerknes. Now let's say Bjerknes. Bjerknes. I don't know if the J becomes a Y or if it contains the J sound. I'm not quite sure because again, and I don't think he mentions, he might mention it briefly.
Big players we're constantly using to help us predict big storms, the European, the NAM, the graph, the HER. Now, how do these visualize? Spaghetti plots. These are our visualization of the numerical weather output statistics. And that's really what modelology is. It's really nothing more than math problem. You get a big algorithm.
Why was he able to learn this and obtain this information, yet it's completely withheld from my level of human? I mean, I see so many of them in these specialties that weren't even made as a possibility to the children in New York City, Long Island.
And there's hundreds of data points all over the country, in the ocean, up to the upper levels of the atmosphere.
Oh, look at that. His last name's Panetta also. Go figure.
Atmosphere. Those are plugged in along with our current conditions to help predict the future. And that's really what.
And here, this is where it says 1920s, Louis Fry Richardson, and then something by Vilhelm and Bjerknes. Bjerknes. Something like that. Again, he doesn't say the sound, so I'm not quite sure. And then in the 1950s with computers. They didn't bring them forward in emerging technologies and problems to the locals until like 1980s.
Really what it's all about. This sort of idea came around in the early 1900s. Vilhelm Bjerknes was a Norwegian scientist who started the primitive math, and Louis Fry Richardson was an English scientist who was the first scientist to hand plot the weather for the next day. Now, this is something I did when I was in college. It's incredibly difficult and it takes a long time. And with the invention of computers in the 50s, data became more available and things just became a lot faster. And that's really
the problem. Why would you want to put rocket fuel and boosters on a hidden science for a reason so there wasn't multiple threats to personal biological security via route of multiple models that now they just plug in and it becomes like this really dark, dangerous potential future? That's what I don't understand. Why they keep enhancing this. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.